Hi there, I'm Danny Henderson. Thank you for coming back to my beautiful channel. My guest today has been on many people's screens over the many years, and her story is very, at points, distressing potentially. So, warning, get your kids out of the room, please. This lady is very well known. Also, her great work as a psychologist and a therapist, a woman who has worked in the prisons and worked for the love and the support of humanity. And her name is Max Lowen. Welcome, Max.
Thank you for that very lovely introduction. And it's truly an honor to be here with you, Danny.
Thank you. I've known about you for quite some time, but particularly through your very close friend, the lovely Australian Rachel Vaughan, who's also a friend
Yes.
of this channel.
Yes, Rachel is one of my closest, maybe really my best friend, and she is a stunning human being. So,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. And it's ladies like you and Kathy O'Brien, Gloria Masters, and Rachel Vaughan, and Jeanette Archer, and other ladies, and mostly ladies that I've had on who've gone through SRA. And your bravery is incredible because not only is it incredibly brave for you to come out, having had different MK Ultra and different programs entered into you, which we'll get into a little bit, but also just shows how strong the human spirit really is and what we can overcome and the love that is in us, so we're learning to be the love that we are, like Kathy O'Brien always says that. And so, Max, I would love you just to take your time and just share some of your earliest memories of your childhood and the countries that you have resided in.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in a political family and as such moved around probably roughly every 2 years. So I grew up in Chile, in Lesotho, which is in Africa, in the Dominican Republic, Argentina, and then my teenage years in Rome, Italy. Um, my Italian side of the family, my uncle in particular was my handler pretty much since birth. My mother, I believe, was actually programmed to do this. No matter where we were living, we went to Rome every summer holiday and every winter holiday. So he also visited most of the countries where I lived at different periods to do different rituals and such. My earliest memory is a ritual that he did when I was in a crib, that I remember the bars of the crib, that was designed to break attachment between me and my mother. It involved things like loud sounds, strobing lights, my mother tied in a chair, um, uh, me being swung around upside down by my foot. And my mother, clearly to me, now that I look back, was the victim of, mind control and abuse and all of that. And she was very sexualized as well. And so she was already kind of hanging by a thread, but I think these extra this extra torment resulted in her basically, she had alters. So she would either be very depressed. And so as a baby, I would experience, crying for a long time and her not coming, or she was very angry and very violent, which continued throughout my lifetime. So she was also a perpetrator. She was very in, it was inconsistent. So sometimes she would seem to be okay. Sometimes she would go into a very violent alter. So I learned very quickly to have a strong kind of read of her to see which mommy it would be and whether I was in danger or not. Um, just based on the way that she was, I became, this is pretty common. I became her mother at a very young age. Um, and another early ritual that I remember involved, it was when I was living in Chile, so I was about 2 years old, and my uncle had come there. And he had probably just had use of a small church, a small Catholic church. And he had my mother and some of her siblings in the pews. And he did a ritual with me. There was a priest, I remember, and him on the altar. And they took a metal cross and heated it up and they laid it on my chest so that it sort of burned into my flesh. And there was some ritual, tying me to Satan and all this stuff. And then I was put into a little coffin and left in that church on that altar overnight. And so I say this also to show you that my mother was always involved in my torture. Sometimes she was tortured with me. So she was really also a victim. And as a mother myself, I cannot imagine the horror and the helplessness that she must have felt with her daughter being, also taken from her and trafficked, and also, she was a perpetrator, but like we both know, she was also a victim. So it was, those are some of the earlier memories. And then I'll let you ask me more about the facility I was taken to in Rome and the Vatican and all that. But those are sort of an example of some of the earlier memories.
You mentioned that, well, not in so many words, but to help people understand who and how and why does this happen. But people again that are coming to this new information, it's
Mm.
multi-generation. So we're talking about your mom, her siblings, and your uncle, a brother therein, who was part of also having come down in multi-generational MK Ultra torture, and creating alters of the mind, fragmented mind, being able to cope as a depressive or as a drunk, an alcoholic, a violent person. One thing that you mentioned, and that as a nursery nurse, former nursery nurse, it's always bothered me that people in the different training programs that come into the medical industry, oh, you have to do this, no breastfeeding, it's bad for them, give them formula, all that bullshit that we're taught. But I've never believed myself in letting a baby cry and cry and cry and cry. They call it sleep.
No.
Okay, you remember that, don't you, Max? You remember being left to cry clearly.
Yes, yes. And see, this is deliberate. And the books that tell you that this is good parenting, this is all cult-backed information. Attachment is the single most important thing for a human being. They did these horrific experiments in psychology where they took baby monkeys away from the mother and they put them in an enclosure and they gave them a choice of a wire mesh mother figure with a bottle with milk and a wire mesh mother figure with a terry cloth covering. And the baby monkeys would starve to death and die, but cling to the comfort pseudo mother. So they know this. And this is hence why hospital births are part of actually global MK Ultra. If you look at all the TV shows and if you look at hospitals, all the babies are in the little bassinets in the room alone. And they're not with the parents. Like they take them and they put them there. They tried to do this with me when I had my daughter in 2003. So they're still trying to do this recently. And I refused. I insisted on keeping her on my body. So they know that attachment is vital to a person's formation. And so they did it with me, but they do it with all of society. And part of that breaking attachment would be, for example, this getting mothers to go work. So now mothers will have a baby and 6 weeks later, they'll go back to work. There's a severing of attachment there. There's all kinds of layers in modern society. And then this cry it out, sorry, but bullshit, right? This is actually extremely harmful. And the idea is, oh, well, you have to make your baby independent. Well, the way you make a human being independent is you fulfill all their needs as they need them. So a baby needs to have physical contact, needs to be tended to whenever they're upset, needs to be fed, needs to be loved, needs to have that eye contact and that bonding. And if you raise a child that way, they actually internalize all of that good structure and love, and then they become independent, autonomous, balanced human beings. And so the reason we see, frankly, so many adults in the world that have tantrums and behave like 2-year-olds is because they didn't get those needs met. So this is a really significant part of what the cult does. because it's a great foundation to mind control, both an individual or the collective of humanity.
And thank you for expanding on what MK Ultra actually is in the bigger spectrums, because many people just apply it to an SRA victim, or military, or people in the 60s having LSD experiments done to measure the science of consciousness, etc., or taking a child to the point of near-death experience to again measure their psychic ability. But actually, it's a much wider spread net, and it is multi generational. I mean, I know one of the pinpointing names is back there in World War II with the Nazi principles and programming, and it was considered like Mengele, Dr. Mengele. But actually, it's gone on way before that. That's just some of the more recent, I suppose, in the last 70 odd years that we've been, applied to or pointed to as a point of reference. But in reality,
Yes,
these practices have been implemented actually for thousands of years, haven't they?
that's correct. SRA was the first form of mind control. And so then the military and psychiatry became involved, around World War II, like you say, Mengele, that's how I say his name. I don't know how it's really pronounced. So there were, and then when he was brought over to America, then his work then and prior work, like you say, informed the whole MK Ultra. So mind control has been practiced for, like you say, thousands of years, absolutely. And it just has become more enhanced with psychiatry and with, in recent decades with technology. So it's pretty, it's even more deeper and well orchestrated today than it ever was. But you're absolutely right about that. And you are, I believe, in the UK. So if people want to research, if some of your audience is there, is the Tavistock Institute. This institute was created to mind control. And in fact, in their sort of mission statement, they say that their goal is a one world government. And to get there, they will use future shock, which is basically trauma-based mind control. So things that they have done to us individually and understood and learned, then they applied to the collective. So some collective trauma would be wars, would be poverty and scarcity, which are completely engineered and not natural, would be psyops like 9/11. And I don't know if I can say the plague, if you'll get censored for that, but the recent plague. These are all actually global satanic rituals. So, and this has been, and you can look up Edward Bernays and all these types, all these people, they have actually written books on how to mind control the human population. So the things that they did to us and have been doing to children, like you say, for a long time, kind of was the foundation of this. And I always like to point out that what they did to me and my fellow survivor friends, they then learned and they used this trauma-based mind control on the collective. And my dear friend Kathy O'Brien always says that the sexual abuse of a child before the age of 5 is the single most effective tool in mind control, and it then becomes generational. So if you look up epigenetics, you understand that the environment actually affects the genes. And so with sexual abuse, you then you create generational layers of humanity that are extra compliant and extra open to mind control.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's the learned behaviors. I've met people over the years, utterly dysfunctional, and behaved extremely as badly as things that were done to them, but have said things like, it's fine to beat a child because it didn't do me any harm. And I'd be like, yes, it did do you great harm, so there's a form of denial. And then people in families, the adults who've had, not just, physical, aggression towards them, which is never okay. It doesn't matter who you are. It's not okay to physically harm another human, especially a child. But they grow up and they'll be in the houses, let's say an adult mother and father, and then they get triggered by the children who are just responding to stimuli and their feelings and sensitivities. Then a program clicks on because what happened to the adult, they'll then program and pattern that into the child. But it's all a mess and it's all wrong, and if people just start there, sit and take a breath, recognize in the moment your response to stimuli is programmed. If you've gone through
Yes.
right? A culture of violence and coldness and a verbal attack and harm. There's so many things. We don't all need to go to a therapist. We make excuses. I don't have the money. I can't do this. There's people like you out there. There's people like me out there. There's Kathy O'Brien out there. There's Rachel Vaughan, and you ladies that I've met have sincerely, truly gone through some of the worst imaginings and unimaginings of any humans. Yet all of you, without exception, have come out on top and you hold a level of love and care. And you have been doing your own healings and you still have enough compassion in you to try and help and heal others, which is what you do, Max. And it's incredible and it's testament to the natural nature of the being, of the human being at our natural core is loving, is unconditional loving, which is how we've all survived, those of us on, levels of life. But the nurture, the receiving in the home, whatever that home may look like, whether it's with a grandparent or with a guardian or an adoption or whatever, that nurture has the element, the door opening in the mind for the mind control, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And when I was being mind controlled in my uncle's underground facility in Rome, which, by the way, connects to the subterranean levels of the Vatican. There were a lot of experiments where it's called trauma bonding. So there's this, they give you something good and it's nice, and you kind of attach because attachment is so natural and necessary. So all children must attach, whether it's to an abusive parent or not, they have to survive. So they use that knowledge. And then, so they bring you in with love bombing and attachment and then smash, So as an example, one Easter, I was given a little cute yellow baby chick. And I am very, I guess what you would say I'm an empath. So I always had telepathic communication with animals and also with nature. And so and being so starved with love, but it's just naturally who I am too. So I loved this little baby chick. So that was allowed to get me to love it, to need it, to bond with it. And then a big kind of granite paperweight was taken and right in front of me smashed with my hand on it, with my uncle's hand over mine and smashing that baby chick to death right in front of me. So this is part of the training. Also, in that facility, being put in isolation in cages. I would actually make friends with the rats that would show up at night to have some connection, and being starved for days. So they'll take away and then they'll bring you the food or take you out of the cage and you experience. So it's to create a bond to the perpetrator, which normally, if you're always abusing someone, then you're going to not trust and you're going to hate the let's say the handler, right? So it's this complicated use of psychology where there's a lot of abuse and then there's some, kind of giving back. And this is, for example, what the Stockholm syndrome is, right? So it's very, very complex, and that is done to create a need and a loyalty for the perpetrator so that then you can be successfully trained into whatever they want you to, whatever tool they want you to become that's useful to them.
So let's go to the Vatican and the tunnels that the monster uncle handler of yours had access to, the subterranean tunnels. And I know that for the Catholics out there who are very bonded and programmed to believe and follow that hierarchical element of of the planet, it might be a hard swallow. But then if we take it down a notch to, like, let's see P. Diddy right now, or the Playboy Mansion, or this is old news and old tactics, at every core center of harm to whoever, adult or child, there is always an underground, subterranean, hidden hands,
Yes.
hidden tunnels. So this is not something that's like, wow, what do you mean? This is, I mean, just look at the Colosseum. You go to the Colosseum in Rome and they had, everything was underground, the animals, the people that were going to be eaten, I mean, and attacked, the gladiators. I mean, it's an old ancient program. So please take us into, as much as you're comfortable with, the uncle and taking you into what did it look like? What did the tunnels look like? And how come there were other children there? Where did they come from?
Yeah. Well, first I want to validate what you said about things being underground. There are, and you know, if people want to understand also ley lines, to go look at Rachel Vaughn's work, because they'll build things like the Vatican on specific energetic centers, and things like the city of Washington, D.C., et cetera, right? And all of these places will have underground tunnels, facilities. There are underground cities. And very commonly in sort of more significant psychiatric hospitals or medical hospitals, there will be tunnels under there as well. So this is not just in Rome and what I'm going to describe. I just want to validate that this exists everywhere, and this is how they traffic children. They have basically captives under the ground that breed children for their use. It's a horrific reality that exists under the ground. So I just want to validate that. Um, yeah, so the subterranean levels, no one would know about. I was taken there, and there was a big special room with a huge marble altar where I witnessed them bringing in babies and toddlers and small children, and they would brutalize them in ways that even a horror movie wouldn't give you an adequate description of. And then to get the adrenaline flowing, of course, for the blood to be adrenalized, and then they would ceremonially cut the child with a special knife, and then the blood would go down and would be collected in these chalices in the corners of the altar. And there would always be people, VIP people in attendance. There would be, basically it was a ritual. And so they would drink the blood. Sometimes they would pluck out the heart and eat it. In general, these people eat human flesh. I have seen babies be cooked and served on platters at these VIP parties that I was taken to. So that's another thing. But yeah, so they do these rituals, and the Vatican, um, different factions of this global cult have different, I guess you would call them lineages, or, you know, um, not really bloodline, but sort of like that. And so the Vatican, it's Lucifer. They're Luciferians. They also have a throne to Lucifer down there. If you start to look and you have eyes to see, you will see that Lucifer is actually who they actually worship. And so these sacrifices are to Lucifer. They have a way in these rituals to, like, bring that Luciferian consciousness into their own souls, into their bodies. It's very dark and very sort of complex. I'm not going to be able to do it justice, really. And I want to say to people who are Catholic or religious in general, okay, I'm not saying that, people do this in a benign way. They want to connect with the divine, with the creator, with the source of life and love and light. The thing about religion is it was a cult creation to separate us from our divinity. So it makes that divine something outside of us rather than something inside of us. And, in the Bible, it's the wrathful God who smites you and is a jealous God and needs you to sacrifice your firstborn. Well, that's not the creator God. That's the dark Lord. Okay. So it's mixed in with truth, but there's distortion. And I always like to point out, and I know this is probably going to upset people, but I used to witness this below the Vatican and then be taken to church and, the ritual of communion, where you eat the flesh and drink the blood of Jesus. And well, this is actually a satanic ritual in disguise. And what they do is when you participate in these rituals, you're giving your energy and they harvest that energy and they use it. So, see, these creatures is what Rachel calls them, and I love that name. They're not, they have severed that connection to the divine. They don't have creativity or life force energy. So they have to use our energy. Indeed, everything that's created on this planet, the hell on earth reality that we live in, is their agenda, but created through us and our energy, often unwittingly. So I I don't want to say that, I don't want to take away from people that they are connecting to the divine and to, let's just call it God. It's a loaded word, but at the same time be aware of the manipulation because they really, really, one of their big things is they want to disconnect us from our divine connection and our divine selves.
Mhm. It's really tragic, and I've seen it so many times and say to people when somebody's, let's say we're seeing somebody on television, we're so programmed to celebrate the celebrities, which we now know is a ridiculous joke.
Yeah.
More people are realizing that's not where you put your attention, unless you want to worship the devil, of course. And when these people stand there, and many of them on purpose, when they're giving all glory to God, we need to be asking which God are they giving glory to? Which Lord are they worshipping? Because a lot of them are not worshipping a creative, loving, benevolent, creator. They're worshipping Satan, Lucifer, the Dark Lord, aren't they? Quite simply.
Yes, yes, sadly, quite simply. And Satanism isn't some kind of Hollywood portrayal of it. Satanism is an ideology, it's a way of life. And over decades, they have socially engineered society to be very satanic. So the ego, the me, the survival of the fittest, the all of these things are satanic ways of living. So they have successfully, to a large extent, changed us. Like you said earlier, we're love, right? And you see who we really are, for example, when they use their weather technology to flood an area or destroy something or burn it. The human beings around, what do? They come out, they help, they bring supplies, they take people into their homes to live with them who lost their homes. This is the normal human condition. They, of course, have wanted to sever the brain, the mind from the heart. The heart has a magnetic field that is way bigger than the brain does. So we live in a brain dominated, mind dominated society, deliberately severing that connection to the heart. They can't really do it successfully though. We still love, but that is their intent. So we live and if people think, oh, maybe I sound crazy that we live in that we're run by a satanic cult. They're kind of being pretty open with it nowadays. Look at the Olympic Games opening ceremony. Look at that Sam Smith performance for, was it the Grammys or what? I don't pay attention to that stuff, so I don't even know what it's called. Um, Look at music videos. Look at the fact that in the US, they now have Satan Club at schools. Look at people, models going down the runway. What are they wearing? It's in your face today. And this is what one of their goals has been, to create a society where people embrace worshiping Lucifer. And one of their other goals, which they're unfortunately well on their way to achieving, is to normalize pedophilia. So absolutely, they have engineered us into living in a satanic ideology, and we don't even realize it.
Mhm. Also knowing that the systems are crumbling down, the light in us is rising, which is pushing against the dark, because even in the darkest room, the tiniest flicker of light, see it. Yet in the light, you barely see the flicker of darkness, because it has no
Yes.
life force. And like you said, they have to create through us, through our life force energy, through our blood, through rituals. And but it's so beautiful, because I know that the panic, the crashing down, the now that the again at the top level, the ETs that are connected to the satanics and the demonics, which I talk about all the time. None of the systems are separate. It is all one big thing. And so with the hang on a second, I just completely lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Someone's trying to interrupt us here. Yeah, so nothing is separate. I'm sorry, Max. I just lost my thought. I beg your pardon.
That's okay. Let's start over.
Gosh, well, there's just so much to say here. They are crumbling down, they are losing, they are dying, but they are still trying to pretend, hey, no, 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 we're in control. Look, we're still doing this and we're still doing that. That's why that thought got blocked. That just got frozen in place, because we've all been programmed. So there's a typical example there of, I guess, emotional paralysis for a moment because of the inbred fear in the cellular memories that we all have from lifetime to lifetime. And then, yeah, they're failing, they're falling, they're dying, all of them in front of us, but they're still pretending and popping up everything like it was, like the agendas 2025 and 2030, which is the WEF, the WHO, the other idiots. It's not happening. They're all failing, they're all dying, like beetles on their backs. True, isn't
Yes, true. I fully agree with you. So, by the way, if the hierarchy here on Earth is a pyramid, the people at the top were non-human. And I say were because I believe in the recent years, they are no longer with us because the level of consciousness and the light has gone high enough that they cannot be here in this reality anymore. And what you say is true. Darkness is simply an absence of light. If you strike a match in a dark room, it's not dark anymore. And that's why I advocate, people say to me, well, it's overwhelming. How do we change the world? Well, you start in here. You go into yourself, you do your inner work, you do your shadow work, which is often unpleasant because we've all internalized violence and perpetration and and there's things in us that we need to look at and heal, not to mention also our abuse and our wounds, because actually those leave energetic holes when they're unhealed where they can penetrate and come in. So if all of us do our inner work and heal ourselves, it's like a light bulb that turns on. And imagine a map of the world with all these light bulbs turning on. That's the end of them. Okay, that's the end of them. So you're absolutely right. And I can feel that those beings at the top, those lower astral dark entities, are not able to withstand. We've already increased the light to a degree that they can't survive it. So it's their lower level minions that are still running around trying to run things. And I want to make a point about what you said. See, they will put out scary headlines. Oh, we have control of this. We're doing this. We're going to do this. Because if we attach to that and have fear, then they can use that frequency to try and create that thing in reality. So it's important to keep in mind that part of all what you just said is them actually trying to get us to help them bring into fruition these dreams of theirs, these nightmares for us, but dreams for them, right? So it's kind of a balancing act to know the truth, but also not get sucked into those lower frequency survival emotions. So David Hawkins has a very nice visual. It's called the map of consciousness, right? And so at the higher levels, the emotions are all attached to a frequency in his chart. So in the lower level, the survival emotions, fear and hate and anger and despair and guilt and all these things and shame. This is why they pump out so much negativity and fear in the media, because they want us in this frequency bandwidth, because there we can be controlled and used to create what they want. Once we do our inner work and heal ourselves and rise to these higher frequencies like love and peace and courage and all that, they literally can't exist up here. See? So when enough of us get up here, the entire outer reality will shift and they won't be able to exist. And it's already happening at the tippy top of that pyramid, in my opinion.
I believe it and I've seen it and I bear witness to it, absolutely. And you mentioned David Hawkins and the great book Power versus Force, and that he mapped the human emotions, the frequency, the hertz of each. And he says that the joy is at the top, but we can't maintain joy in the body 24/7. But love is a whole different. And that seems to be the key. Like when Kathy O'Brien was released from her mental trauma prison from being a zombie and a zombified dead sex slave who only functioned on control. Once she connected in her heart to her husband Mark Phillips, when she was able to feel and come up and the frequency in the body shifted, then she was able to be aware of her surroundings and then come into the healing. So it's just so beautiful to, again, precise that to people trying to understand. Let's take a step back to the Vatican. So from your uncle's house, was it stairs going down into a tunnel? Were there magnetic levitation trains under there? Paint a picture for us, please, if you can.
Yeah, so it wasn't his house. It was a location that we would drive to. It looked like a sort of nondescript, maybe like a van rental place. He drove a white nondescript van when he went there. I'm not exactly sure. I remember a big chain link fencing around. So it just looked like nothing significant. And then there was a sort of, it doesn't even look like a door that you go in. And then, yes, there's some kind of a weird, there was some kind of a weird elevator that didn't really work like normal elevators that then went all down, deep down. And it was very big. It had, I mean, it had all these rooms. A lot of them were glass so that when they would do things, like when they would do things with me, there would be these men I remember in white coats with, at the time with little notepads, and they would study. So they would experiment on me psychologically and study my responses. They had all this technology that, they hide the technology they really have from the public. And this would have been in the 70s. And yeah, there's some things in there that, I mean, you wouldn't even see today. So all kinds of technology. They had it's almost like an underground city, They had a morgue, all kinds of things. And so yeah, and they had he would uh get animals and kidnap gypsies in Rome who are undocumented, so they won't really be registered or missed, and do all kinds of horrific experiments and basically slow torture killing of human beings and animals to study it, to just to harvest that energy. And unfortunately, one of the things that they discovered pretty quickly is that forcing me to watch or participate in that is what really destroyed me the most, much more than torturing me myself. So I was unfortunately witness to some things that, yeah, no horror movie would ever even do justice to.
Thank you for being so brave and sharing. I know it's not easy, and I know that you're interviewed a lot and you have to go over it and over it and over it, and it takes such
It's
courage.
okay.
And we do appreciate you very much.
Yeah.
Can you move through from that place of capture and experimentation to the lower levels of the Vatican and what you witnessed there, please, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, well, they were connected, right? So that the Vatican basically had its own torture facility. And the what I remember so far is just what I've described to you earlier, the ritual sacrificing of children. The other thing is sometimes I was in this section of the Vatican. I can tell you if you're standing in front of it and looking at it, and the cupola, it's the buildings on the right. So sometimes I would be taken there and there would be other children and there was trafficking of children from the Vatican itself. It was also connected to, these sort of elite parties. Some of them I remember different mansions and places, black tie, all dressed up. We would be brought there, myself and other children, so that the people in attendance could just select one of us to rape or do what they will with. Um, you know, a long time ago, a friend took me to the movies to see this movie called Eyes Wide Shut. I had to run out of the theater because it was so triggering. It's kind of like that, except in the movie they left out the children brought in to be pedophiled. Um, so yeah, so I would say it was a place. It was a mutual cooperation through those underground tunnels, and yeah, I'll leave it there.
Mhm. And how did they move? What vehicles do they use underground there?
It was some kind of like a train. They have very advanced, again, uh, transportation systems under the ground. So I suspect that what I saw there exists all over the place. I think there's some very high speed trains underneath, for example, the whole United States and probably, I'm sure everywhere in the world. Yeah. These people also, I think some of the sightings of spacecraft are actually some craft that they have for their own use. So the cattle, meaning us, travel, in the sardine cans known as airplanes, and, they don't travel that way.
Mhm. Thank you for confirming that too. And I also know that very well to be true, that a large majority of what we consider to be UFOs in the sky are actually reverse engineered craft flown by military personnel or regular pilots, who also have submarines. Underground facilities too, underwater facilities too, and it works for humans, these monster humans, and the good ETs. There's a lot of reversed engineered transportation, let's call it that. Um, you, as although it's not a great word to use, a chosen child, a special child, a reserved child, a child that, when used in these terrible ways, wasn't ever allowed to be unalived. When you were at these parties, was there a marker that you wore, a bracelet, a number, a color, a statement of dress, so they would know that child you can't, end its beingness? Anything like that that you can help us understand?
Yeah, I don't remember with some of the indoor ones, but I remember with the outdoor hunting ones, having some kind of a bracelet on, and it was supposedly a special thing because I was a good girl, so you can wear this nice colored, it's kind of elastic sort of bracelet. So I remember it in those settings. And with those, in case people don't understand this, it's fun for them. It's a big party. The children are dressed in special things or naked or whatever and sent to hide, and then they are literally hunted, and it's terrifying. And when they find children, they rape them, they cut them to pieces, they torture them. I saw at one of these them take a couple of babies alive, and this is kind of horrific, but impale them on a very, very long sword and then swing the sword around. And they're laughing and they're drinking and they're using drugs. And this is kind of their fun. And at some of the ones indoors that looked like Eyes Wide Shut type stuff to me, it's full of orgies. It's frenetic. It's very satanic. It's truly, these people enjoy this activity, and they enjoy, um, there were rituals I was taken to, I don't know where, also where like I would be raped on an altar with a cross. So there's all kinds of, pregnant women cut open, babies cooked and served on platters. I mean, you would think this couldn't possibly exist, and you would think that because we're human and we could never, ever hurt an innocent in that way. So that's why people sort of repudiate that. They're like, oh no. But we have to understand these people are psychopaths. They're severed from that kind of norm. They have no empathy. And yeah, so these are the kinds of things that I witnessed that were associated with the Vatican. Sometimes I would be given to certain people for periods of time. Sometimes it was out of like these nice hotel rooms. It kind of varied, yeah, in terms of the trafficking.
Again, it's incredible that the strength of your, inborn nature, going through all of this and witnessing all of this, that you didn't become some institutionalized nut job, or, you know, as you discussed, you were inserted with suicidation ideas and programs at certain levels that you would then choose to remove yourself, which I'm so glad you didn't. But then to go on to working in prisons and jails, some of the worst, most harmed people on the planet end up there, being thrown away, being put there on false accusations too. And I know that you've managed to be a loving light and a leading light and a healing light for so many people over the years. It's just absolutely remarkable. And as you say, us humans, you know, would never ever bring to mind imagining what you've seen, but it does exist and it still happens, and there's less of it, but it's coming up, because the top tier has been dismantled. And so now the light is coming up and everything is being revealed. There's that saying,
Yes.
sure your sins will find you out. It's never ever been more truthful. Um, let's take a step into some of the psychology of this, because you and I both know various people who are in the public eye. And again, I salute them for being so brave and speaking on such awful, dreadful truths. But there is a level of, with all the kindness in the world intended to you guys out there, nobody in particular at all. But Max, let's talk about victim consciousness. What are your thoughts on that? And how could we explain it to someone?
Yeah, well, there are many, many programs, and I was programmed through many different tortures. So, as a little sidebar, I'll give you an example. My need for, I would see this girl. I think it was not a physical girl, but it was some connection I had. And so, for example, that was exploited. Like, well, you'll get to see the girl and play with the girl if you do this and this and this. And then I was put in this room in the facility, and I saw my uncle and handler go and bring this girl walking down the hall. And this particular room had a ceiling to floor fan, which suddenly came on, just huge. And as he approached the room, he pushed her through the fan so that her body was destroyed and splattered all over me. And that, for example, it's a horrific torture, but it's mind programming for me. And I had to really overcome this, that I had this idea in me that if I got close to any person, if I had any friends, that they would be killed. So that kept me from, until I was probably 17, I didn't dare make any connection with the other kids at school. So in my front life, I went to school, I wore very nice clothing, I had skiing lessons and horseback riding lessons, and went to the country club, and I had nannies, and I went to school in a black chauffeured car. So I had this kind of front life, but I was completely withdrawn and didn't say a word to anyone out of a paralyzing fear that because of me, people will get hurt. So, for example, that's a way that that program was put in, right? Now, to what you're saying with victim consciousness, it's also a program. It's a cult program that they use on all of society. In the last few years, they've really pumped that through with the woke program, where everyone's a victim. It's disempowering because, and this goes along with the savior program. So everyone is going to save us. The people in spaceships are going to come save us. A 2,000-year-old man is going to come back and save us. A former president is going to come back and save us. So if we need to be saved, then we're victims. If we were to be saved, we can be helped to save ourselves, but there's no growth or empowerment happening if you're in a victim consciousness, right? And so unfortunately, I've encountered out there this kind of idea that if you're an SRA survivor, oh, poor you, Max, no, not poor me. I'm strong. I'm a warrior. I'm a spiritual warrior here. Don't poor me. Yes, things happen to me. And there's a stage in recovery where you have to really process that, and you have to know that you were victimized. But you don't want to stay stuck there, because if you're stuck there, you're disempowered and you will not go on to be the full potential that you could be, which the cult wants to keep us all from, because then we're dangerous to them. So to keep everyone as a victim is extremely wrong and disempowering. And part of that is also, I've encountered this idea that you should tiptoe around SRA survivors because, you might trigger them. Okay, you cannot control the outer world. The triggering is going to be a normal thing for us and for everyone, because if you have unhealed wounding in you, then it's kind of like every unhealed wound is like a play button, when you play a video. It's there, it's fine until someone brushes by and touches it. And then it opens up and activates a reaction. But it's the reaction, 80% of the reaction is about an experience in the past that has been activated inside us. So when people are triggered, that's why they get all reactive and then they make a big mess. They scream at someone. So being triggered, I have used that for my healing, and that's what I teach people. So if you get triggered, go, oops, okay, something got activated in me. It's now my personal responsibility. So if I'm talking with someone and they trigger me, I say, hold on, I need a few minutes, or I need to call you back tomorrow. And then go in and follow that trigger, because it's leading you to a memory. It's leading you to something in you. Feel it. We couldn't feel it when we were children. We had to box it up, compartmentalize it, and put it away because it would have killed us. So feel it, know it. Feel how old you are inside. Like, oh, I'm about 5. Usually some kind of memory will happen. You'll gain an insight on something that you went through. And then you'll realize the mental program, like I just described that girl, what they did. My mental program was, if I'm close to someone and love them, they will be killed. Well, that's not true, but that's the mental program that I developed because of that experience. So then you find that mental program and you go, okay, so you talk to that inner child of yours and you help unstick that trauma, and you say, no, that's not true. Loving is good. That was a lie. They did that to you on purpose. And then you put in the true thing, that loving ourselves and others is the way out of all of this. It's actually good. So there's a whole process that happens. And so being triggered, the person outside you or the event outside you isn't the bad guy. It's just a trigger to go in and clean something out. So if we use triggers that way, we evolve ourselves higher and higher. And so I find it disturbing, yes, thank you for mentioning that, when there's a sort of an idea that, oh, you're a victim, oh, can I say this word, or, can I wear this color? I mean, you can't alter the outside world to avoid being triggered. You have to allow that and work with that. And as you do, you will become over time less and less reactive. And that's actually freedom. You're not free when you're always reacting to an external stimuli. That's part of the mind control. When you have a choice, what you say or do, that's actual freedom. So anyway, that's how I see it.
Mhm. And that's beautiful. And it's a very important subject to discuss. Let's say not just between two trained therapists, or you're a psychologist, but to really have, a moment for people to think about when they're getting triggered and they're putting information into the field, or they're finding other people who've been through very similar to them. There is a program within that for all of us to fight and attack each other. And that is happening.
Mm.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it in the SRA, the CRA, in the ET, in the galactic, because again, every single system is connected. Whether it's a need that people have sometimes, they've got to be right. They've got to be right because in their world, they know the truth and only the truth, and this is what they see and believe. But we aren't aware of every single thing that's happening. We can't be. We're
Mm.
also kept, even the ones at the top, let's say of the satanic occult, some of them do not know everything. Then they're kept apart. It's like when a president comes in or a prime minister, they're only given keys or certain levels of security. It's only the very, very small percentage at the very top of the entire world that do have the whole oversight. And even then, there's protocol to go through. So we got to be okay that a lot of us are wrong. We don't have all the information, or something's happened that we haven't been informed about, you know? And so it's all right, but don't turn in on each other. Recognize, take a breath, that everything's coming down. It is a fight to the death. It is a spiritual war. It is good against evil. It is the loving creator against Satan, Lucifer. And so we've got to recognize the top plan. And it's two sides of the same bird, isn't it? Two wings on the same bird. The evil in this. They
Yes.
back everything. It's not one side or the other. Evil is evil is evil, and it's just so
Yes.
destructive. And I'm seeing it so much.
Yeah.
And
So, sorry.
no, please.
No, I just want to say what you're describing is another cult program, which is called Divide and Conquer. Okay. If we're going after each other because of this or that or the other, then our energy is being dissipated and we're not focusing on the only one true enemy we have, which you're right, it's this spiritual war. So this is a great, actually, war technique. To do, I believe it's in the Sun Tzu thing. So this is a war tactic. So yes, and it's also what you say is true. In the hierarchy, no person at any rung of the hierarchy is given all the information. They're given, it's all compartmentalized. So there are some people that will follow a certain politician or a certain, whatever person out there, believing that they're good because no one has all of the information. Okay, so some people will go and be part of something thinking that they're doing actually good. So for example, there's a lot of stuff about the US military, and there's evil at the top layers, but at the bottom layers, people actually believe they're working for the good and they're following their orders, but they're compartmentalized, so they may not know that their order is actually negative for people. It's very complicated. It's not black and white at all. So, and just because a person is, perceived as bad or wrong about something doesn't mean also that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know. It's very, very complex. But mainly, I think what you're saying is I have seen this as well, and it's disturbing to me. We should all stick together. Actually, all of us who are trying to expose this cult and trying to expose SRA and trying to expose the entire structure and hierarchy of this planet, none of us, we're all going to have blind spots. We're all going to miss something. That's not the point. The point is we should all support each other, because I would say they probably want and have tried and programmed people to go after each other within a certain subgroup because, it's very effective technique. You silence people, you discredit them, you take them down. Well, let's focus on the real enemy here, because again, divide and conquer is like victim consciousness and the savior program. These are all basically MK Ultra programs.
Absolutely. Thank you for expressing that so beautifully. And again, I don't know a single human who isn't in some kind of healing process. This is the opportunity.
Yes.
Light is rising in us, that we're awakening from this huge slumber of all of our lives, not really truly seeing what's in front of us, because this is the clever design, all the many screens and levels of, harm that have happened to everybody. I don't know anybody who's escaped on some level, of just mental, emotional, verbal, physical, sexual, so many different things.
Yeah, and we're always growing, right? So, I mean, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I would have been wrong in some of the things that I believe and thought. We're always evolving and growing, so we're never going to be perfect. And so you never, that's why you can't judge anyone else. It's completely uh ridiculous because we're always evolving and growing beings, and we all make mistakes, and then, hopefully we learn from them. But people come through, I mean, I came through the New Age program, the feminist program, until I realized how those are programs. And you just, it's a process of growth. Just like you can't be mad at a 2-year-old for not being able to solve a calculus problem, you can't be mad at someone who isn't at a level of consciousness that you're at. They're still getting there.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very, very true indeed. Um, let's go from, I know that we've decided and discussed beforehand that you're not going to mention any names, politicians, famous people, celebrities, actors, all those kinds of things. And everyone also needs to know that there isn't a single system on the planet that isn't affected. I'm talking science, education, hospitals, prison system, every imaginable system has an element of this darkness rife within it. So you would see all of these kinds of people. I can't imagine how horrible it must have been over the years to see people on television and say, oh my God, I know you. You're pretending to be Mother friggin' Teresa, and you're not. You're the very opposite of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's safe to say it this way. Anyone who is in any position of authority in the global agencies, in high levels of politics, like presidents, prime ministers, heads of education, medicine, pharmaceutical companies, Hollywood, media. I mean, most media people are CIA talking heads, right? So everyone at the top echelon of any structure on Earth will have either been grown up within the cult or been being brought in. So if you're at that level of power, you're part of the cult. So you don't even need to identify people so much by name, because just know that. So just look, see who's in power and who controls things, and you can bet they're part of the cult. That's their control system. And they would have done pedophilia, whether willingly or not. And it's also a form of blackmail. And for me, I mean, there are some people that I remember, but I'm still working on my own inner parts. I've done a lot of work, but there's booby traps and suicide programs inside all of us. And right now, there's something unsafe about me mentioning personally people that I have seen. So when I get to that point, I will, but I have to respect my inner parts. And because to not do so would be to be violent to myself, just like outer people were violent to me.
Yeah, no, and that's a really powerful and important point to raise. That it is not your place, your duty to in the name of helping everybody else, is you've got to put you first too. And that's a beautiful point, because no matter what we've been through, no matter what we're healing, we don't need to sacrifice ourselves in the name of truth either, because our role is to heal the inner child, the little girl or the little boy inside of us, and take care of that. And so those that sometimes are pushed or coerced or threatened, or you're demanding, you have to say this. No, you don't, my love. You do not. Nobody needs to do that. Taking care of that little one inside first is everyone's priority, or it certainly should be.
Yeah, and also, I mean, naming names, it's good, it has its usefulness, but really, there's a lot of other areas to work on, such as one's own inner work, such as, what are you doing what's our contribution, our mission, so to speak, to help this planet in the spiritual war, to help the light win, helping other people. There's lots of things that we can do that are extra beyond naming names may be helpful, but there's a whole swath of people that are mind controlled and that wouldn't believe you anyway, you know? And so, for example, I've told people the Q thing is a psyop. It's trust the plan. Someone's going to save you. In other words, it takes people who are awake and who might take some action, and it sidelines them and parks them over here. So in the same vein, people have said to me, "Oh no, because they reveal a lot of truth, so they're actually, it must be real." And I say no, because the people that are mind controlled and hear that won't believe it anyway. They'll say it's a conspiracy theory. So naming people is important, but also a large segment of people will not buy it anyway because they're so mind controlled. They will reject anything that contradicts their program. So then maybe there's some good work in exposing things gently, or exposing different facets of the cult to wake people up. So a big thing, I think, is waking people up to the truth. And you start with the truth that's relevant to them. So SRA survivor testimony is for some people, but some people won't listen to that. It's too horrific. They think that doesn't apply to me. So then you have to start where things apply to them. Do you have medical freedom? Are you being forced to take things that you don't want to take? Are you, the economy, like they're raising prices? Like, you have to link real world things that matter to people to the cult and show them how this is all part of the same thing. So there's different audiences for different things, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very, very good points. Very good points indeed. You mentioned also briefly the ley lines, the electromagnetic lines that naturally exist on the planet, these power points. This is how our planet exists. These are the framework for her. And that we know that back in the day, any points where the local people, the indigenous people, they've been given different names over the years. Let's talk about the more Western cultures of pagans and druids. Because of the mind control programming, people are immediately forced and trained, groomed and schooled to think that anything these days druid is satanic, anything these days pagan satanic, and that's absolute bollocks. And it's such a slight on ancient beauty, ancient nature, natural. So you and I know the ley lines on the crossover points, or the nodes, or the Michael and Mary lines, whatever they've been called over the years. There are so many in let's talk about Britain, for example. Ancient churches built directly upon ancient temples, ancient places of worship. When we go to the American lands in America, you can look at how many massive plantation homes and big mansions are built directly over our beautiful indigenous brothers and sisters' burial grounds, sacred grounds, because they were also, engineered, where the ley lines cross the people to bring energy from the earth. So they've tried to concrete over the whole world. They're still doing it. They're still trying to concrete over Göbekli Tepe, the Turkish settlement that's been recently uncovered. And so knowing that, again, gives people another level of their own education, go and look into that. And then we know that there's been so much bloodletting on the ley lines, on those points, those electromagnetic points. And people like Rachel Vaughan are encouraging people to sing into the ley lines, like the Aborigines in Australia, for example, to bring love, to try to heal, where a lot of these rituals are used over and over and over and over again in the same spot. The blooding of the trees, the blooding of the lands, the hunting parties. I mean, all of that. What would you like to say to that?
Well, first, I'd like to say to go and check out Rachel's work on ley lines to really be informed, because I'm an amateur here. But what I would say about it is ley lines are not at all satanic. Ley lines are natural energetic centers it's kind of like our chakras of the earth. They were used by indigenous cultures because they were They were energetic. It facilitated connecting with the divine, healing, and things like this. So what do the Satanists always do? It's their playbook. They take something good and they use that energy to channel it to their own perverted needs. That's it. So they've built structures on these energy centers again because they're parasites. Okay, they don't have their own organic life force. So they have to take ours and they have to take the earth's. So that's all they've done. So it isn't satanic. It's an appropriation of something sacred to be misused by the Satanists. So yes, when Rachel encourages going and singing, it's sort of to take that back and restore it to what it was originally for. Remember, these people are parasites. They cannot create anything. That's why we're still here, because they need us. They harvest off of us in every way. In a 3D way, they steal our income that we earn, and they use this word taxes, which is just legalized theft, right?
Yeah.
They steal our energy etherically. They use our energy, even in something like a football stadium or a concert or some event. They're circular, like the Colosseum, like you mentioned earlier. And the energy of the people it's designed to harvest that energy to use to fuel their dark agenda, which actually is the good news, Danny, because they need us, but we don't need them. So when we all look inside and deal with our own inner stuff and wounding, we recover ourselves. We grow into our full potential. We are all telepathic. We are all psychic. We all are self-healing. This is natural to us. It's been stripped. When we step into who we truly are and we refuse to comply with their agenda, when we say no, when we don't let them take our energy, they can't continue because we're their batteries, like Morpheus says to Neo in the Matrix, right? So, well, that's the good news, because it's really bottom line, and this is kind of goes with my personal responsibility. The psychopaths will be psychopaths. They will try and do what they will try and do. It's the power lies in us because they need us to execute this. And so we take our power back and we refuse to play that game anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very powerfully said. Moving from the Vatican, and again, people are welcome to look into just the architecture of it, the symbology of it, those that have eyes to see, those that would like to look at it with a different set of eyes and a different view. It's been very purposefully engineered. We talked about, you mentioned Washington, D.C., I will mention London, and then we have Rome. Rome is the religious center, because the Roman Empire went nowhere at all. It still exists today as Rome, as the Vatican. And then London is the financial center. And then Washington, D.C. is the military center. So those three systems, if we took time to look at each of those three cities and how they are geometrically and architecturally engineered, we will see very ancient patterns of setting up, of planting overlay lines, of capturing energetics. And it is so old, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years old systems that have been passed down and down and down and down. And the Bohemian Grove, and our beloved friend Kathy O'Brien was trafficked through there, and has a lot of description on who and when and how and what it looks like and how it works. It's very real. Alex Jones is given credit, which is great, for being someone that went and filmed there many years ago, because many may not have been able to have that awareness and awakening. It seems that at times when people have the courage to put things into the field, this whole domino effect occurs. And then the dark ones realize, well, there's nothing they can do about that but deny it or ignore it, or have people come out and mock it and call it conspiracy. I mean, God, when are they going to come up with a new word? So far, pretty much every conspiracy theory over the last 4 years has been proven correct. Yawn.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing how inept they are, the incompetence and the incompetence. From the Vatican, where I think you said you were around 17 when that level of harm was stopped because you were going on to school. Could you share a little bit more about the release from that arena?
Yeah, and just before I do, I want to validate the Washington, D.C., City of London, and Vatican. So these places are not part of the countries that they're residing within. So, that's important to know. Washington, D.C. is not part of the United States. It's its own, I don't know what to call it, no man's land or separate thing. And they each did have their functions. So Washington, D.C. was the military might, and the City of London was the financial arm. And the Vatican, I mean, loosely, they all played multiple roles. The Vatican was sort of the Holy See. It's the SEE, but it's the SEA, the Sea of Consciousness. So they were responsible for controlling the collective consciousness, you can souls, mind control. So they each had their interesting little functions. But if you go dig, it will be interesting to find that. So the Vatican is not part of Italy. It's its own. It's its own country, essentially, right? So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this there are certain abilities that I don't know if I organically had or were trained into me or a combination of both, but um, there was a one final sort of torture incident when I was around between 17 and 18 that was done outside in this kind of rural area. And to make a long story short, I had it. I had enough. There was something in me that said, I'm done. And this is something that they don't want us to know, that we're actually more powerful. And when they need consent for everything that they do, and not saying no is implied consent, right? So I said, I'm done. You're not going to do this to me anymore. I'm over it. Also, at the same time, I was always slated to go from my high school in Rome, Italy, to the United States for university, which I ended up doing. So I think on an energetic level, it was me just saying, I'm done. You cannot do this to me anymore. I'm not going to participate. And then 3D situations, which brought me over to the United States. And so it's kind of stepping into my power and just drawing a line. And I think per universal law, which I have some memories of pre-incarnation, they need to get our consent to do what they do. So they put it out there, like they put out Agenda 2030 in a document, or they tell us these things in movies. They show us what they're going to do. Just recently, the delightful Klaus Schwab said, "You will own nothing and you will be happy." Well, they're telling you what they're about to do. They did a simulation of that plague. They supposedly, blanketed the planet. They explore these things ahead of time. They have simulations. They have written these things out. If you look, you will see disclosure everywhere. Okay, so why is that? Because if we don't say no, it's like, oh well, they're on board with it. So one of the things that's super important, and again goes back to the part that we have control over, is to begin to say no. So if everybody said no, I'm not going to shut down my business, nothing would have happened.
Mm.
See, there's too many of us. It can't be a force thing. It has to be a manipulation and a mind control thing. And I think what people need to wake up to is we don't have our compliance and consent are furthering the situation. So to circle back to your question, I think that was a huge aspect of it for me. I just got to a point where I said no. And then, circumstances ended up in me leaving and coming to the United States. And then at some point I changed my first and last name and I did my work and I freed myself from that cult. And you mentioned this earlier, I worked in jails and prisons. I ran a program for men who batter. I worked with abused children. I worked with abused women who were trauma survivors and addicts. So I did a lot of trauma work in my 20s and 30s. And that for me was actually part of my healing because in the facility and in all those places, I was forced to watch horrible things happen and I had no agency. I was helpless. I couldn't do anything about it. So being able to help people recover and, just having that agency suddenly was something extremely significant and important for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely incredible. It's just so incredible. So in going back to you today working with people, I want to share in a few minutes the work you're doing, the class that you have coming up, which is going to be massively important for people who are recovering from trauma, and trauma is trauma. And we always say on this channel that if someone looks at you and listens to the horror that you have lived through and survived, they can't compare what you endured with their own. There's no comparison because each individual is feeling on a different level. We can't deny what we have to heal because Max Lowen went through so much worse than we did. That's also a program. Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Stop thinking about yourself. Look what Max went through. And you're you and the others at the level of SRA that you had to enjoy. None of you would ever say that. You would never deny another person who's been through anything, to not heal themselves. I do want to ask you on a supernatural, spiritual level, at times, if you're comfortable, if you were able to witness anything of the demonic forces, have you seen demons, demonizing symbols, anything like that that you're happy to share?
Yes, I saw some demons invoked into the room below the Vatican. They had red eyes and they were sort of smoky, so it was a smoky form, not fully corporeal. I was sometimes sort of attacked. So a lot of the attacks after I got out and went my own way were in this manner, sort of demonic, energetic. So, for example, there was a time I was going to bed and I was lying, you're sort of about to fall asleep. And suddenly there was this insectoid demonic entity like hovering like right above me and it made a buzzing noise and it was horrifically ugly and it was sort of coming at me with its fangs and everything. And for a moment I was scared and then I remembered, no, no, no. So I said to it, get the fuck out of my face. I do not consent. You do not have permission to be here. Go. And then it let out this horrifying shriek. It was like, and it like shriveled out of but I could actually see it, you know. Again, it's not solid matter, but it's definitely visible. I've had a lot of things like when I first spoke out and would tell my story, not only the sort of suicide program that was built into me would be activated, which I had to overcome, but I would be like mentally attacked by demonic entities. So, oh, you shouldn't have said that. Oh, everyone's gonna hate you, and so it's almost like you can hear it's like a gremlin-y tone. It's a frequency. So I've had actually quite a lot of experiences of being attacked in this manner. So I've had to really learn how to uh, stop that. And so, yes, I definitely have seen many versions of these entities. Yeah. And I can see them sometimes in people.
Yeah.
So, there's certain people like you can feel it and you can sort of see it in them. There's something that's not human in them. And I mean, I would say you can see these in some of these more, elite type parasite perpetrators out there. People I've actually seen it's kind of like in the movies where it's the person's human, and then there's a little glitch. There's like some thing that, and then you can see, I've seen a reptilian looking person under there. It's very momentary. So then it's back and you think, okay, am I crazy? But I know today that I'm not crazy. So I have seen all kinds of things of that nature. Yes.
Wow. When you were in the Vatican and you witnessed the demonic apparitions, is it because they were invoked by the people doing a ritual? And what was the area like? Were you under St. Peter? Like, where were you in the Vatican and who was there? Not naming, of course, because we've decided that's not your role. Not that you're playing a role, of course. We're being very careful with our words, and respectful of you, of course. But can you share more about that? How it came about, who was there, and where were you?
Well, these rituals, these dark rituals, when you torment people and then sacrifice them while they're still alive, it energetically, it like tears, it makes a tear. It's like a portal, it's like an opening for these entities to come through. So who was there? I mean, I was there, forced to kind of watch it, but there were all kinds of celebrities, religious figures, uh, agency people, high level people that would participate, and they do these rituals. And this is not something I remember myself directly, but how do I explain it? It's just something I can tell, like the your king, your current
I don't have a
uh
clue, but I know what you mean. The king of Britain.
well, your country's supposed, yeah. These people will, at that level, will do all kinds of ceremonies. They'll sit in special chairs, they'll wear special crowns or hats, and this will be to bring some, whatever their dark demonic overlord is, whether it's Lucifer or others, into their to their consciousness, into their being. So this sounds very kind of out there, but consciousness transfer is possible. There's clones. There's other entities such as reptilians posing as humans. I mean, there's all kinds of varieties of this stuff. It
That's
sounds like a science fiction novel, but you know, everything that you think is fiction is actually true, I have to say.
there's that saying, if you can imagine it, it can be, and if you think it
Yeah.
can be it, or worse, that effect. And sometimes we don't even know why we're not shocked or surprised, even if we're like hurting for the person sharing experience, because somehow on some level sometimes we've connected because we've seen it or it's been around us. Or I remember going to a nursery school as a child, and there were some adults there doing things they shouldn't do. And I remember two of the little boys, one was called Andrew and one was called Ian, and I forget Ian's brother, they were twins. And I knew those adults were doing wrong. And they knew I knew I was that kid. I knew I've been my whole life, I've been witness my entire life, clairvoyant, as you say, seeing things in people. You can't hide from me. I was
Yeah.
born that way. And every single day that my mum would drop me off, not whenever I went there, I would demand to put on a yellow princess dress and little purple shoes and a little purple bag. And I would sit at the glass door and wait for my mother to come back and get me. And I always remember that I had power as a 3-year-old because they
Yeah.
knew I knew. And I've never forgotten that. And I've
Yeah.
never lost that power. It's always been there. And to other adults, again, not to put them into upset or trauma themselves or trigger, but honor yourselves, the adults now who knew there was something, or about a teacher in school or something. Don't discount that, because that helps everybody in their healing. It really does.
Yeah. No, I say it that we're all billboards. Our past lives, it's like there's a signature, there's a color, there's a frequency, there's all of the things that have happened to us. I think actually that's our natural state, but of course that's been dumbed down and mind controlled and engineered out of us. But some of us, we come through and we may come, we may have volunteered to be here to help in this war. And so, we bring these abilities and they can't sort of turn them off in us. And but I would say everyone has that, and no one, we've been trained to not trust it. If you follow that inner voice, that intuition, that knowing, I mean, you can really see, we're all telepathic naturally. Again, that's been dumbed down, so we use language. Well, with language, you can lie. But when you're telepathic, it's not that you hear the person's thoughts, you just receive all of it. You know whether they're being deceptive or not. You know their frequency. It's very clear. So I would encourage everyone watching this to just practice that, to begin to observe yourself when you pick something up about someone. Don't just bat it away, like focus on it, and you'll begin to see that you pick up a lot more than you think.
Yeah, so true. There's the other element too to always acknowledge that sometimes when we look at someone, that person can trigger our own demons and we instantly don't like them because we're in denial that we are owned and we have attachments. People go, well, I'm good with Jesus. I read the Bible, I go to church. And, Jesus isn't here to do all of the healing for you. We have to do it for ourselves. There's always this passing
Yes.
around of, well, I'm okay. I don't trust a single person that puts himself in any element of authority, a pope, a vicar, or whatever. They're humans too. And look how many of them turn
Yeah.
out really on the bad side. Obviously not all of them, goodness me. But no, it's important. Let's talk about your upcoming, you've got a 5-week course in trauma that's starting. You're creating a survivor group for victims of violence. So it's not just SRA focus, that's a big enough awfulness, but again, to include everybody who's got something to heal. So
Yes.
5-week course coming up. On trauma in January 2025. How can people connect to you and connect to that?
Yeah. Well, I want to say it's kind of what you said a few minutes ago. Trauma is trauma. If you're born on this planet, you're traumatized. It's a continuum. SRA could be over here, but it does the same thing. It's very similar. So, and it's really important for us to understand trauma, how we've been traumatized, what it looks like, what the things are that we do because of it, and how to tools and techniques to recover, not just for ourselves, but so that we become immune to the trauma-based mind control used out there on the collective, right? It's very important to, and even this course, this 5-week course, could be for people who have family members that are traumatized or are allies or whatever, just to understand it. It's I think it's really one of the most important things that we should learn, because we live in a cult trauma, planet. And then the group, similar to what you said, it's for survivors of violence. It can be incest, it can be SRA, it can be domestic violence, it can be any kind of violence, because again, trauma is trauma. And so with group, that one's going to be 12 weeks, and it's going to be it's going to be limited. It's going to be basically group therapy where people are going to learn about trauma, and people learn from each other. It decreases the isolation and the stigma. So those both will be on my website on unbroken.global. The dates and the times will shortly, soon, in probably the next week, be added on there so people can go and sign up. And with the course, there'll be 2 offerings. One for time zones that are USA and Europe friendly, and one for the same class for time zones that will be USA and Australia friendly. Because, we all live in different parts of the world, so there'll be 2 of the same. So depending on where you are, at least you have a pretty good chance of being able to do the time. So yes, at unbroken.global, they will be up soon, and people can sign up.
Excellent. And on your website, unbroken.global, there are many other interviews that you've done. There are many
Oh,
other
yes.
that people can connect to. And again, I'm just in awe of the power that you've managed to maintain and the healing that you've done thus far. And I know that it's an ongoing journey of healing, but you're at a point now where you've done enough training as a psychologist to understand your own self and how to recover. And now you're in the field helping others. So there's so many people, they say, well, I want to know what my mission is, Danny. What's my mission? And I always say the same thing. Your mission is to heal. You have to heal you. That's your inner child, your upset, your trauma, your whatever. And if you were somebody who inflicted, there is a healing there when they're ready to admit and, get through that too. Um, everyone's healing something. These people that want to jump out and say, I'm on a mission, I'm going to do this. You're no good to anybody. You do more harm than good, working with people who trust you and then they realize, oh my God, you can't take care of me. You can't guide me. You can't help me. You can't create a safe space for me because you yourself are unhealed and there's an unhinging in that healing. And, we've got to be so careful. Humans, we are very fragile at times, aren't we?
Yeah, and I would actually encourage anyone who goes to a therapist, the first question to ask is, have you done your own healing?
That's so true.
Because otherwise, don't go to that person. Because we everything is through our filters. And you mentioned something earlier, which in psychology is called projection. Anything that we're unaware of in ourselves or we're unable to see or don't want to own, the psyche has a very clever way of helping us see it, and it's like projection. It literally, you see it in the person out there in front of you. Okay. And so someone who has not done their work would not be someone you would want to guide you to your healing. And again, people have said, oh, you have helped, you have healed me. No, I haven't done anything. I have guided you to heal yourself. Sometimes we need a guide. We need, I think for my own experience in therapy, I needed a therapist to develop attachment with, to develop trust with, because I didn't have those things. So that was a very useful part of it. But yeah, absolutely. My own healing journey is probably the biggest thing that informs me in helping others because I've seen all of it. I've seen the parts of myself I didn't like. I've seen the parts of I mean, we all internalize the abuser on some level. I had a phase where I was extremely angry, and I was leaking that anger out on people around me, and I had to correct that. There's no shame in that. We really have to be self-aware. So absolutely, I think that's really important. And I've been working in recent years one-on-one with survivors of trauma in general, some SRA or many SRA survivors. And so this group and this class is just an additional step that I'm doing. And there will be more. And you're correct, on my website. I have two goals: help people understand that they need to heal and give them. So some of my interviews have been with healers and different topics. There's the physical body, the mind, the emotional body. But also my goal has been to interview other people who have exposed the cult, other SRA survivors, because the truth is light. Truth is a frequency. So you need the truth and you need to heal yourself. So those are kind of the two things that I've identified as the most important. And so all my interviews on there are free. There's interviews with amazing people. Indeed, I would like to interview you in coming up soon. And so I interview people. I call them truth warriors, because they're putting out information that other people need. So everything on there is basically for free. I do a shorter series called A Dose of Truth with my friend Olga. Those are 30 minutes, and they're very specific topics like Satanism or mind control or medical experiments. It's kind of newer. And then I really love to write. So I've been just recently started a Substack. I think it's Unbroken with Max. And so I've been putting out articles. There are things about victim consciousness, things about shadow work, things about the cult and how it operates, all kinds of written articles as well. So, and all of that is free for people because, and you can't know your mission until you've done your work. It's an automatic evolutionary step once you've dealt with yourself that whatever your mission is will be exposed. And your mission could be what you and I do. Your mission could be, baking some really beautiful foods for people. Your mission can be creating amazing music that elevates people. Your mission can be all kinds of things. It's very unique. But the way to find that, you've got to start here first. And this is another program. This idea that everything is outside of us, this idea of authority, this idea, so people, they take a weekend course and then they call themselves some kind of spiritual guru or whatever. No, no, you've got to really investigate the people that you're going to choose to help guide you.
And also one journey in ayahuasca, for example, mother, like medicine, the medicine of the mother, it is not for everybody. And there are so many broken and fractured and altered people who will go and do something like that. And they're triggering other unhealed parts they're not even aware of. It can be so dangerous,
Right.
and they're sitting around lying on cots and throwing up and with I mean there's so that has I mean I've sat with people who've gone through that, and they're re-triggering, then the
Yeah.
dissociation is worse. It's like when I've sat with you, like now, let's say for example, and Kathy O'Brien and Rachel Vaughan and Gloria Masters, etc., and other beautiful strong survivors, 9 times out of 10, once we finish speaking, I lose you guys for hours because it's not easy doing what you do. There's a disassociation that happens. So I know I'll have to wait for the links. I'll have to wait for the thumbnail. I'll have to wait for whatever I would like to make sure I include, for example, because you can't sit in that you have just raised within you, some of the worst things in your lifetime, and you're doing it to share, but also to care for others. But then there has to be a moment, a time for you to process that, and then regroup the healed parts and bring them back into alignment. And that's an important point to mention too, isn't it, Max?
Yeah, yeah, it's not easy. I do these interviews and on a level I enjoy them because I really enjoy communicating with other, incredible human beings such as yourself in this case. But it does have a toll, I'm exhausted the rest of the day. A lot of the time I have to change my clothes because I've sweated during the interview. It's my nervous system it just does its own thing, even though mentally I know what's happening. So yeah, and we all have to take care of ourselves and know ourselves. I mean, really, self-awareness is the most protective mechanism you can have. I live my life now always with a part of me observing everything I think, everything I feel. You come into consciousness of it. The more you practice it, the more often you come into consciousness of it throughout a day. But, I'll be feeling kind of, I don't know, down or something. And then I go, okay, wait a minute, what's going on? Why am I feeling this emotion? Is it a part? Did something trigger me? Or I'm thinking an angry, I've overcome this. I used to be kind of an angry driver. My pet peeve was people going slowly in the passing lane and blocking me, and I would just get so angry and curse them. And that actually affects people, by the way. Everything you say and even you think is an energy. So you're putting it out there and it's not good. And I finally realized that it was triggering my being thwarted, being kept, being tied down, being prevented from, doing what I naturally wanted to do. And once I discovered that it was a trauma that was being triggered and I worked on it, poof, I'm so calm now. It's actually quite pleasant. So, it's a constant journey of observing yourself and overcoming. And, if you blunder and you make a mistake, we all do, apologize. Just say, oh my God, I was an ass. I botched that. I said the wrong thing. We're all human. And so the important thing is just if you make mistakes, that's how you learn. So you don't spiral down into, and deny it because the ego says you have to be perfect. I think I would trust a person who was someone who acknowledged they were not perfect and made mistakes much more than someone who presented with this perfect persona.
Right.
That's fake.
I absolutely agree with you. I do. Well, dearest Max, thank you so much for bringing yourself here to my channel and to the beautiful audience that will see this, and for also being a beacon of hope and light and somebody who has come through so much, together intact and aware and still helping others out there in the field. Thank you so much, Max.
Thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. And I hope that, what I've shared helps people. That's really my intent and my goal.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'll make sure all the links are underneath so everybody can reach out and connect with you. Thank you. And to you beautiful guys out there, I know a lot of this content today, I mean, this is Max's life, it's not content. It's her actual life, her experiences and how, she's able to bravely sit before you and so on it. And I know that you will honor with kindness who she be. And I hope that in some part you yourself find some kind of feeling you watching there. This is what this channel is about. And my name is Danny Henderson, and I send you all so much love from my heart to yours. And I'll see you soon.